I engaged with the creative process, and that's what produced all these synthesis aspects of the universe bring about. I mean, the non-living is already so full of splendor, and the living and the potential of the living, it's not even fully realized. When you think of that, then you really get overwhelmed about the intelligence of the Creator. I was a materialist in the usual paradigmatic ideas of physics, which is based on scientific materialism. You know, everything is made of matter. I graduated in theoretical nuclear physics, and for 10 years, that was my life. I used to calculate stuff, properties of nuclei, and used to speculate, give talks. But at one conference, I was invited, and I gave a talk. And I remember I thought I didn't do very well, and everyone else is doing better. And I felt so jealous that jealousy energy eventually just burned me out. And at 1 o'clock in the morning, I went outside. It was on Monterey Bay, and the ocean air hit my face, and the thought came from nowhere. And the thought was, why do I live this way? I obviously had a huge conflict within me building that my research life was very much separated from my regular other aspects of life. So I started integrating. That was the beginning of the new life in physics. Quantum physics says that objects are possibilities. Objects are waves of possibility, to be exact. And then when an observer looks, however, we find that nobody sees possibility. One sees actual events of experience. Objects are revealed as particles. So how does the wave become a particle? Just by observers looking. Because material interactions can produce only more possibilities. Material interactions cannot do anything but produce possibilities, bigger and bigger possibilities. So how does possibility become actuality? Just by simply the observer looking. So observer must have a non-material aspect. This is the paradox. How can the observer have a non-material aspect? If we are his brain, that many neurophysiologists and scientists think of ourselves, then how can ever matter interacting with matter give us other than possibility, actual events of experience? This is just the beginning of the quantum measurement, and then there are many other paradoxes that come in also. And this is where it weaves in very naturally. So we say observer's consciousness must be non-material. That's the beginning of the whole paradigm shift. When we say that, people will immediately say, well, how does consciousness interact with matter? Because they are two different things. They could not interact without exchanging a signal. And if you exchange signals, that means you are exchanging energy. But the energy of the physical universe itself is always a constant. So how can energy be lost into the world of consciousness and vice versa? So these are very legitimate criticisms, but nobody was looking at consciousness in the right way. So what happened was that I had the idea came to me that if consciousness is the ground of being, consciousness is everything there is, consciousness is everything, and matter is possibility of consciousness itself, then consciousness can choose from these waves of possibility without having to interact, because it's choosing from its own possibility. There is no need for interaction, or there is no need for exchange of signal. And this signal-less communication has been discovered. So we already know that such interactions are possible. And that's the solution then of the measurement theory, that the observer's consciousness, through a signal-less communication, chooses, and that choice makes possibility into actual events of experience. And to think that matter, which is so solid and so rigid sometimes, and so concrete, and matter to be made of consciousness, something that is so nebulous and so vague and so woolly. And yeah, I can see the consternation of my materialist friends, and I'm very sympathetic to their difficulties and in grasping this. But if one grasps, here is the key. Materialist science, the way we do biology, chemistry, physics, psychology, medicine, all of these fields have developed so many paradoxes and so much of anomalous data. If you look at the totality, you'll be amazed that scientists are not concerned about it. In other words, the current paradigm is breaking down, except that we are so specialized, no specialist in his or her particular little narrow field does not notice the amount of anomalous data, the amount of paradoxes that have accumulated. Only a holist or a person of generalist interest, and I am one, I suppose, can see it, and then we get alarmed that there must be an answer. And when we find the answer in terms of a science within the primacy of consciousness, we discover to our delight that all the paradoxes can be solved, all the anomalous data can be explained. And so it's wonderful news, actually. Scientists have nothing to be worried about. The old science remains as valid as ever because the new science incorporates it. But the new science opens up a huge vista, a frontier that we now can investigate. The consciousness chooses from possibilities the actual event. So the trick then is that in what state of consciousness do we choose? It turns out that we choose in a non-local, non-ordinary, non-local state of consciousness. What does that mean? It means that in an interconnected consciousness. I spoke of this signal-less communication. In that state of consciousness, signal-less communication can happen, and this is why it is very potent in that non-local state, because it has the capacity of choosing from all possibility, all waves of possibility, and obviously these possibilities must contain the healing possibility that you're talking about. So in that very non-local state of consciousness, we can choose the healing possibility, that particular facet of possibility that contains the healing of the person, of the diseased person. So it can be extremely potent. The whole point is that, of course, we are ordinarily, in our ordinary ego consciousness, we cannot access this non-local consciousness. If we can learn, if we can practice with a lot of patience and a lot of creativity, if we can practice how to access this non-local consciousness, the source of this quantum choice from possibilities, then we could not only heal, we could solve economic dilemmas, we could find new meaning in our lives, we could discover love in relationships. The possibilities are unlimited. We have become materialists only in the last 50 years. Actually, before materialism became so strong, which happened in the 1950s with the discovery of molecular biology, because biologists thought that the secret of life is finally at hand with the structure of DNA uncovered. But this thinking that matter is everything and there is nothing but matter, this is very new thinking. Before that, what we had was a sort of a hodgepodge philosophy called dualism, where mind and matter were both regarded as potent. René Descartes, the famous philosopher, discovered it or enunciated it, I should say. And this has been a part of Western philosophy ever since, until the 1950s, when this lost popularity because the materialists thought that matter can explain everything. Mind can be explained by matter. So that's when we lost it. And because we lost it, we have to rediscover it now. The idea is absolutely wonderfully scientific and simple to verify. When we say God is not dead, of course, people get the idea that, well, religions, they are the ones who are supposed to know about God, and they fight with each other, so therefore there may not be any real definition that we can agree upon. This is not true. The first thing one notices is that all religions agree that God is a source of causation other than the material level of causation. Today we call the material level of causation upward causation, because in their picture, elementary particles are the final cause, eventual cause, and everything else is made up of elementary particles making atoms, molecules, neurons, brain, and so forth. And that's their picture. And the only material interactions, they build everything. But spiritual traditions, religious traditions say that no, on top of this, there is another source of causation, and that's the source they call God. So it's not that it's a woolly idea. It's really about, is there only material cause in the world, or is there any other cause? So what does this cause represent, or what does this cause, is there a signature of this cause? Both of these things become clear in quantum physics, because in quantum physics we need a source for choosing, because quantum physics says every object is possibility, so there has to be a non-material entity that chooses the actual event from the facets of these possibilities. So we need a causation, a source of causation, and this is how this source of causation works, by choosing from the possibilities that is offered to it by material interactions. So we have a clear idea of how this causation works. And the next question is there a signature of the causation? And we find, to absolute surprise, that there are absolutely wonderful and unquestionable signature which can never be simulated by material interactions. One of these signatures I was talking about earlier, called non-locality, signal-less communication. All material interactions must occur via signals. Signals must carry material interaction. Signals are everywhere. So if you look at space-time universe, there is no way that one can communicate without any signals. But it just so happens that in quantum physics, there is this non-locality, there is signal-less communication. We have discovered it experimentally in 1982, and since then, many other experiments, including human subjects, have shown the ability of signal-less communication without exchanging signals. So how is it taking place? The idea is that consciousness is mediating this kind of interactions, and through downward causation. This new source of causation, which we call downward causation, to contrast it with upward causation. This causation not only exists, it has a definite theory, namely it is the quantum choice, and it has definite verification by virtue of its unique signature. One of these signatures is non-locality, signal-less communication. Big Bang theory is something that one can believe in because it is also based on a good theory, and it is also based on good data. We have data which suggests, namely cosmic microwave radiation background that pervades the whole universe. This background radiation comes to us from all directions, and that could happen only if, and it's cooled off just the right amount since the universe exploded in a Big Bang. So all these things agree with the basic theory. And Einstein's theory predicts that there should be such a singular event. So all these things are the good news. The bad news is, from a quantum point of view, of course, the universe must be a possibility until consciousness looks at it. So this question is very interesting, and to make a long story short, there is now a principle called the anthropic principle, which is again based on some very absolutely amazing coincidences. So what transpires then is that the universe is built in such a way to make such a sentient observer possible, and when the sentience comes about, then only the whole universe going backward in time becomes manifest. Now you said that what the heck the Big Bang is doing, and now imagine that the Big Bang is not even there in a chronological sense that we are used to think. Big Bang is there, but only when a conscious observer looks at the possibilities, collapses the possibilities into actual events, and then going backward in time, all this stuff, the solar system, galaxies, supernovae, Big Bang, all that happens, but only going backward in time from the event of that first observation. We become used to thinking of the physical things as outside world being there permanently. We don't think that they exist in possibility. This is the common mistake we make, because the physicist, the physical is external to us. And it seems that nothing we do affects the physical. Because of that, we think that the physical is there permanently without our having to look at it. But quantum physics is saying that in truth, it cannot be that way, because the mathematics of quantum physics, and there is no need to doubt them because they are verified to such absolute order of accuracy that nobody doubts the veracity of quantum mathematics. So this mathematical theory is telling us in no uncertain terms that the world must be possibility until consciousness looks at it. So this is a camouflage that the world appears so permanent, appears so solid, appears so independent of our looking. But the truth is that it comes moment to moment into appearance, into manifestation, only when we look. We look at the universe backward in time. We look at past events. When we are looking at another galaxy, we are looking at distant times. And it seems that the properties of these galaxies or these very distant stars we can understand using the same laws of physics and the same parameters that are involved with the laws. So our belief is that we have verified that the physical laws are not dependent on space and time. They remain the same over time, and they are the same across space. See, this is where consciousness is the ground of being, and consciousness and its possibilities being the basis of everything helps us to understand, helps us to solve this complete riddle that, what is before anything that you can think of before the Big Bang or before the Creator, as you're putting it very beautifully. But in quantum physics, consciousness and its possibilities is the eternal beginning. It's the beginning forever, because if you include all possibilities in consciousness, think about it, past, present, future, every possibility is already included. Therefore, that's a timeless reality. Reality that contains all possibilities that ever was or ever will be, that's a timeless reality. So in that reality, nothing can ever happen. And the reality as we see it, as we experience it, is manifesting from that reality moment to moment in stages where there is some forgetfulness, there is some limitations that is imposed on this everything goes consciousness. Only with those limitations, eventually a manifestation becomes possible. And then universe truly can begin. Because whatever has some beginning will have to have an end. So the idea is that reality, ultimate reality, is timeless. It has no beginning and no end. What happened was that my father's teachings, they were pretty compelling for a while, but I rebelled, probably because of overdose of this teaching, and became a materialist at the age of 14. And after that, I never believed in reincarnation until I discovered this new way of thinking about science and physics, quantum measurement theory and consciousness. And then after my book, The Self-Aware Universe, was published in 1993, in 1994, a strange thing happened. A gentleman, a theosophist, started coming to my office and preached to me about theosophy, which is based on this idea. One of the ideas of theosophy is reincarnation. And of course, how does a physicist find an explanation of reincarnation? So my initial thought was that I can do this, but there is a series of coincidences ending up in a dream. One morning, I should say, I was dreaming. I was just hearing a voice, and the voice became clearer and clearer. And when I woke up, I heard the clear admonition. And the admonition was, the Tibetan Book of the Dead is correct. It's your job to prove it. Now, Tibetan Book of the Dead is about this, what happens after we die. It's about the journey of the soul through bardos, openings, until it's reincarnated. So after that dream, I realized that, no, I have to take this very seriously. And I did. And as a result, much insights followed. And I have a theory of reincarnation, which I published in a book called Physics of the Soul. The thing that we often don't understand or don't even think about is that, we think that everything that happens in our life, everything that we learn, all of that is stored in our brain. But when we posit that mind, the meaning giver of our life, that's what mind is, thoughts have a component that matter can never process. Matter can only represent it. So does the brain make the memory of everything that happens in our mind? It turns out that it does. For the content of what happens in our lives, for example, you were born in so-and-so place, you were born in with so-and-so parents, those are contents. So those contents are all in our brain. Those are recorded in our brain. We all remember my father's name was this. That's history. But there is another aspect of our life that is never recorded in the brain. That aspect is what we learn, the propensities, the characters, the habit patterns that we pick up in our life experiences. You have a particular way of thinking which enables you to be this great radio personality. That's you. I have a character which enables me to be a generalizer. That's me. Other people are mathematicians, musicians, architects. So all these people are born with a character of being the personality that he or she is. That specialty, that character, is something that is not recorded in the brain. So where is it recorded? It turns out when you do quantum physics properly, you find that it's recorded nowhere. It's recorded outside of space and time. In other words, that same word, non-locality. It's recorded non-locally. It's non-local memory. It's memory that is outside of space and time and therefore remains there even when the physical body dies. That's the survival after death. So in a future time, if somebody reaches out to that ship outside of space and time, then he or she is inheriting my character. And so isn't it fair to say that that's my reincarnation? So reincarnational memory is fundamentally this memory of this character, the pattern of habit. And it's so obvious because, if you look at any baby, I'm sure you have looked at quite a few, and you find them to be so intelligent. The materialist model is that the baby comes with an empty brain and everything the baby has to learn. I mean, the genes are something, of course, that is one theory, that genes give us everything. But that theory is so absurd. Genes alone, genes are just instructions to make proteins, not much more than that. So the other theory is that environment teaches them everything. But what if there is no environment at all to teach somebody about something that they end up to be very good at, like Ramanujan, an Indian mathematician. He had no mathematician in his family. And yet this fellow, when he was a teenager, he was solving mathematical problems that absolutely boggles the mind of even geniuses. So how did he pick up this ability of doing mathematics at an early age? Or how did Mozart write entire symphonies at the age of 6? These are mysteries that you cannot solve without invoking the reincarnational idea. Mozart was born with the genius of the musician. That's what I'm trying to say. Why did he get it? He got it from non-local memory in a past life. No question about it. More out there, and we can prove it, and the proof is already here. This is why I often say that scientific evidence for the existence of God is already here. So what are we doing about it? So we have to do something, because God must mean something to us. So what the spiritual traditions say, their idea is that since there is God, therefore be good, do good. So I think we should listen to that a little bit. We should practice, we should bring back these virtues in our life. We have become too much of a materialist today, and some of our problems, global warming, terrorism, economic meltdown, all of this in a bulk is due to the worldview. We are looking the world with wrong conceptual lens. This got to change. Then the next realization was that consciousness is the ground of being. Now, that happened at the age of 49. So my beliefs become so strong in me, and then to overcome them, I have to work so hard. What can I say? It started with a theory of quantum physics itself called many worlds theory. That was the first parallel universe theory that came about, and that was in the 1950s. But still, before then, nobody would think about it because the idea is quite clear. No, because universe is unique. I mean, if there is a parallel universe, it doesn't make any sense because, by definition, we would not know about it. We would have nothing to do with it. It would be completely theoretical because we could never experimentally verify it. So it's pointless. But now the multiverse theories are coming about because, the materialists are positing it because, you see, I mentioned that anthropic principle earlier. That principle says that this universe have some uncanny characteristics that cannot be explained without this hypothesis that the universe is designed in a very fine-tuned condition so that life can originate in this universe. So these very special conditions, and scientists don't like fine-tuning because fine-tuning suggests a fine-tuner. Somebody designed the universe. And they don't like this design idea, as you know, intelligent design versus, theory of evolution. So that is the principal motivation. If we have multiple universes, then what happens is that there are so many universes, you can easily imagine that, okay, one of them may be fine-tuned just as an accident. Chance made it so fine-tuned. And we just happen to live in such a fine-tuned universe, but don't put any special meaning into it because, after all, there are so many universes that one of them can very easily be a little bit special looking. That's the idea. But again, the original criticism stands. Today we have these scientists constantly talk about pseudoscience when they criticize paranormal researchers or people having ideas like, is there extraterrestrial beings, and that they call them pseudoscientific ideas. But science, as Galileo defined it, and as I have pursued it, and many, many people, and most people, I must say, pursue it, science is a combination. It's a two-pronged way of verifying truth. It's a combination of theory and experimental data. If you posit a theory that can never be verified, we should not call it science. So this kind of idea, multiverse, although they are suggested seriously by serious scientists, but they are truly mind games because not science, because you can never verify the idea. Without verification, every scientist should be take their ideas tongue in cheek. I mean, it's not really science; it's pseudoscience. But there are multiverses which we can verify. These multiverses are multiverses within consciousness. For example, we have the material universe, which we sense. We look at the material universe through our sensory organs. Then there is the mental universe, which we think. And then there is the vital energy universe, which we feel. And there is even the universe of archetypes, which we intuit. These are the real multiverses, and these are verifiable because I can verify that I have thought. I can directly experience it. We can compare experiences with each other. We can even study the characteristic of thought in the laboratory. So a lot can be done here experimentally. This is a real scientific idea of multiverse. See, they cannot connect because the connection would then couple the universes. So those real universes can never couple with each other because then they would be just considered one universe. They can interact. Universe, by definition, cannot interact with another universe. So there is no need for assuming that they're in any space because the whole concept of space is space within a universe. It does not make any sense to think of space outside of a universe. You cannot even define really, truthfully, outside of a universe without a discontinuity. Something outside the universe can only be discontinuously outside. If it's continuously outside, then why not include it within the universe that we have? So you can think of space connecting to universes. And this is why I call it pseudoscience, because you cannot not only think about it, you cannot devise any experiment to verify the existence of these multiverses. It's just a meaningless theory put together as a red herring so that we don't put much importance to this anthropic principle, which shows that there is a designer, because without a designer, how can we believe so much of fine-tuning coming about in our universe? The story that I read about Victor Hugo, the famous novelist who gave us Les Miserables, that famous about the hunchback. So, the story goes, when Victor Hugo was a child, one day, he and another child were sent out on a walk, and when they came back, the questioner asked, what did you see? to the other child. And this other child said, oh, nothing much. It's like any other teenager would probably say the same thing today. Their attention span is so small. But Victor, on the other hand, said, oh, so much I saw, I can't possibly think of describing it, but let me try. And he went on and on and on and on, describing all the various things, the splendor of wonder of nature that he saw. So, this is the thing. The optimist, the positive outlooker, is creative, always finding things to create, always have curiosity about the world. So what causes this and what causes that? And so always takes things in a positive way. So things happen because that's the way he's looking at the world. He's seeing meaning in the world where it is full of meaning. Negative person, on the other hand, is pessimistic, does not have any idea that there is any meaning. So always trying to find that lack of meaning, disengaged. And that disengagement means only one thing. Nothing will ever happen to this fellow because things happen, of course, but things pass him by. He's just an onlooker without any interest in anything that happens. And without that interest, we don't see meaning in the world. So, coming back to our main discussion, materialist versus consciousness fanciers, that is the fundamental difference. Materialists fundamentally are very pessimistic people. They refuse to see meaning in their life, refuse to see meaning in the world, refuse to see value in the world, and therefore they believe in a philosophy that takes away meaning and value from us. Whereas as optimists and idealist people, we believe in ideas, we believe that the world has plenty of meaning, and therefore things are constantly happening, and we are delighted explaining what is happening. This is the real fundamental difference, and it is a difference of outlook. The point is that there is this vital energy world, and some people can tap into it because as you become a connoisseur of consciousness, you begin to see that we are more than just our material body. We have a vital body that we feel, and it is these vital energies that is coupling of this vital energy with the physical organs. That is what gives us vitality. When that vitality goes away, when the coupling is not so good, when we are not coupled with this vital energy so much, then is when we fall sick. So somebody who can give us an influx of vitality from his or her own access to this world, those are the healers. So we have hands-on healing, we have Reiki healing, we have healings by Qigong, that's a Chinese practice. Sometimes we use a little bit of matter. For example, in acupuncture, a little puncture is made in the skin with a sharp needle. So that's a little bit of interference. But of course, such a little bit, why such a little bit interference can do such a big bit of healing, that is the mystery. And that mystery is solved, again, by bringing in this concept of vital energy, vitality. First of all, we have to change the worldview. And second of all, we have to become creative. Third of all, we have to start loving each other and develop positive emotions instead of all this negativity that we are talking about. And it goes on and on. So these are real problems. We have a recipe. We have a new economics that we are developing based on the primacy of consciousness. I call it spiritual economics. And I tell you this, that this current economics, which is not really Adam Smith's economics, this is very poorly publicized. I mean, I am amazed. Economics has so much deviated now from what Adam Smith discovered and what is called capitalism. We cannot call what is going on by the name of economics capitalism in the Adam Smith sense now. It has ideas which are completely materialist ideas. That has nothing, Adam Smith's time, we were not materialists, we were modernists. We valued both mind and matter. And it shows. Adam Smith would never allow greed in the equation for economics. Adam Smith would never allow speculation of money being the major part of what goes on as economic investment. Today the real economy, what Adam Smith thought of, this production consumption economy, that's a small part of the economy. The rest of it is just investment bankers play games with money like a casino. And that's what's into this trouble of these toxic assets. And they're already thinking of putting out similar toxic assets, because the regulation is just not, I know the Obama government is trying, but I don't think they will succeed in making regulations. The lobbies are too strong, the Congress is too weak, and what have you. Because physics is, as you know, the basis of all things. And now consciousness plus physics, consciousness is the basis of all things, and then physics is the basic science of all things. So the two together, consciousness plus quantum, is giving us such a handle on how to think about reality that if we are able to make these changes in worldview, and I think that it's a must, because consciousness, all is evolution of consciousness. So eventually the movement of consciousness will remove this blemish called materialism, and we will get back to right track, and the right track will find solutions for these problems. Joseph Campbell had this beautiful phrase, follow your bliss. Without gravity, the large-scale structure of the universe cannot be explained. So gravity is basic. At the same time, gravity plays a rather insignificant role in the way that our own physical body, living beings, are made. So in that sense, gravity is important, of course. We have certain gravity effects on the way we live on Earth compared to, for example, if there was a weightless environment like in a spaceship. So it's not that gravity does not play any role whatsoever. But main role of physical bodies that we have is played by the electromagnetic forces rather than gravity. Large-scale structure, all the laws of the large-scale structure of the universe, how the universe expands, how long the expansion will go on, all that is gravity, play of gravity. Play of gravity, and maybe recently some physicists are making noises about some other universal repulsion, for example, playing a role also. But gravity is the acknowledged major role in that particular aspect of physics. Dark matter may be a concern, but it's borderline physics, because again, the idea of dark matter is extremely difficult to verify. It's a speculation, and the experimental empirical data that people collect is also based on our models. So, it's very possible that in the future we'll have a better model, and then the notions of dark matter that we have today will have to be modified. So it's the models, the difficulty is that the models have many parameters. With that many parameters, there are so many ways of fitting the data. Let's face it, the data is just not numerous enough, and we have no control over the data. We cannot do these experiments in the laboratory. So it's very difficult to make scientific sense out of the vast, all the theories that are coming out in this respect. So I'm a little skeptical about all the different claims. I think partially it's just a maze of ideas that the materialists play with, and we should not take them too seriously. Principally because they're borderline pseudoscience, because experimental verification is impossible. I'm not saying that all of the work that was planned with it is nonsense. Some of it made very much sense. There are some good ideas there, but black hole is not one of them. This black hole specs, this is an extremely speculative idea. People are positing that is a very interesting idea, and only part of it can be verified. But this other part, these so-called Higgs bosons, they have not been found yet. And the whole theory depends on this Higgs boson in a major way. So if the Higgs bosons are not found, then this theory falls apart. But even this idea will never be verifiable enough for us to conclude that Higgs boson does not exist. People will always say, well, we have not dealt with high enough energy. And so how high an energy can you go? We are limited by the energies available for a machine on Earth, and we can only go so high in energy. That energy may not be enough to verify the existence of Higgs boson. So we are in physics, this high-energy physics, we are approaching very borderline scenario for a legitimate science. more and more it seems that ideas are given to us which are not really verifiable, like string theory is a good example of it, dark matter, another good example of it. These ideas cannot be verified in the laboratory. So on the whole, I think it is much better not to take these ideas very seriously, not to spend too much money on it. People can speculate all they wish. We have free speech, so I'm not saying that we should curb people's thinking, let them think any which way they like. But in the meantime, we have very important problems to solve: global warming, terrorism, economic meltdown, spiritual economics, healthcare. Consciousness physics has much to tell you about how to take care of healthcare, much better than the materialist medicine of allopathy. So these are the things that I would pay much more attention. Even a fraction of money that is spent today for making these high-energy accelerators, if that came to the research on the new science, I think would have major breakthrough. We could establish the existence of God beyond any reasonable doubt. It was just a 10-year program with a fraction of the money that was spent on the CERN accelerator. There are a lot of physicists who give support, and what is very interesting is that when physicists retire from their departments, then very often they start supporting these kind of ideas. But, while they're inside the university system, inside the academe, the ideas such as God still are complete pariah. Anybody who utters the G word becomes a pariah as a result. So it is very difficult somebody said, one journalist I think said several years ago that the G word, the concept of God, remained the last remaining obstacle for academia to handle. They just cannot handle it. They fall apart. If you, in the academia, you mention that you want to take this idea seriously, the God hypothesis, they just cannot handle it. These multiverses exist in the form of our mind and vital body and intuition and all that. And within those multiverses, we have already some time travel in the sense that we can recognize experiences from the future. We can sometimes people foresee some event that actually took place. For example, there is very good evidence that people recognize the death of Robert Kennedy. So this kind of phenomena already has some evidence in their favor. On the other hand, real-time travel violates completely the nature of time in several scores. First of all, Einstein's theory of relativity that has a kind of time travel, but it's a one-way time travel. You can travel to the future according to relativity, but you cannot travel to the past. And traveling to the past is impossible also because the nature of time has this one-way arrow built into it. Time flows from the past into the present to the future. It's not the other way around, because other way around would assume that all the universes lie there already somehow, and then we can jump from one universe to the other at a different time. But that picture is not the way the universe is in consciousness, because the universe is being created moment to moment from possibilities becoming actuality. It's not at all like universes can be there as a series of actual stations from which and to which we can travel. The reason is that in 1600s we were just getting into the basics of science, and we were struggling to come out of the grip of religion, Christianity at that time, and therefore most scientists of that era were very careful to not to think that God is in the realm of science. I mean, they would not possibly think that God could be ever scientifically explained. They left God very separate. God and mind is the domain of religion, and science only deals with matter. That's the way that the Cartesian divide was made. And scientists pretty much went along with the divide until the idea came that matter can explain everything. That happened in the 1950s. But before that, people respected that Cartesian divide. So no scientist in 1600 would ever think that it's possible to think scientifically of God and verify the idea of God within science. knowledge has, in the meantime, taken a quantum leap in the discovery of quantum physics. Because quantum physics is the final physics. It really seems that way. It's not somebody's imagination, because quantum physics is being verified with such uncanny accuracy that it is impossible to think that quantum physics will ever be replaced by another physics. And because we know the final physics that is with us, we know that these ideas we are proposing now, which we are verifying, like consciousness is the ground of being, there is downward causation, there is non-locality, there are similar ideas that verifies the idea of God and downward causation. Because we have good theory and good experiment, we can now predict a lot about how the universe will evolve, how we will evolve. Of course, the universe evolves very little in mere 500 years, so that's an irrelevant question. But how we evolve, that can be predicted. And I think within the next few centuries, the main thing that we will have is that our mind, the way our mind has been, stuck with rationality and disregarding emotions. So the first thing we will do is to integrate emotion and thinking. Have you been a fan of Star Trek? I was a Star Trek fan. And you remember this constant, incessant fight between Spock and McCoy of reason and emotion? So that division has played long enough. We have ride like that since millennia. So now the time has come, finally, to end that feud and integrate them. And as we integrate them, we will be able to move beyond this pure rationality. That is, we dream of a pure rational world, but of course we can't because we have negative emotions and they're etched in our brain as brain circuits. We cannot rise above that. This dichotomic battle is being fought because we have ignored to develop positive emotional brain circuits. So once we are understanding this, and we now do, and we know that neurons are extremely plastic. So if we teach ourselves to have positive emotions, if we work these positive emotions out, what are they? It's the capacity to love, basically. Once we have that capacity, Teilhard de Chardin, a great Jesuit priest, said once that we have to learn, we will learn how to harness the energies of love. So that's basically my prediction, that we will learn how to harness the energies of love, we'll balance this negativity, we'll become overall positive, and then we'll jump from rationality to intuitive mind. Instead of reason-based mind, which is constantly difficulty in accepting emotion, also difficulty in accepting intuition, it is a world by itself. We'll give up that kind of mind and get into a more intuitive mind, which will value these archetypes like love, beauty, justice, truth, and goodness. We are evolving towards it, but we never evolve until we are hit with a 2x4. We are, and this is the way it is. I mean, how many people can be creative just by mere curiosity? If you say gently that, okay, go and investigate, that's not motivation enough. But if you send a disease, then we are interested in healing ourselves. So materialism has been sent to us as a disease, and now we have these problems, global warming, terrorism, economic meltdowns, and what have you. Now we are thinking, okay, we must have another science. Oh, God, give us another science. Otherwise, we just cannot take this ills from materialism anymore. So this is what is changing our worldview, and it will succeed. It will take probably decades and maybe even a century or two. So in 500 centuries, 5 centuries, where will we be? We'll be at a very good place. We'll be more loving, more truthful. We'll appreciate beauty much more. And we certainly do not have to watch this inane violence on TV every day. That I promise you. My reincarnational inheritance, it's a passion to know. It's a curiosity that drives all good science. Partly, of course, I must also confess that partly it comes from some suffering as well. I have had difficulties in terms of discovering the nature of love. I have had a couple of marriages that broke down, and I did not know how to love a woman. For a long time, I have lived this way, and finally, I'm just fairly recently, I'm beginning to understand and appreciate the nature of love myself in a personal way. Now, so some suffering, personal suffering has been helpful. But mainly, as far as the intellectual and objective stuff goes, a tremendous curiosity. Much of it has been driven by that. But again, the beginning was suffering. When I first started changing, come to the new physics, the main reason I told you that story, why do I live this way, full of negative emotions, jealousy, competitiveness? I just didn't want to do science that way. I love science, I always have, but I just didn't want to get into that base emotions in order to pursue what I wanted to pursue. I wanted to do happy physics. And with blessings of the divine, I have finally established a way of doing science, way of doing everything, in fact, in a very happy mood of mind. Well, quantum activism is about happiness in life. If you become a quantum activist, your job is to transform yourself and the world in a happy frame of mind, to a negative to a positive frame of mind. That is the primary objective of quantum activism. So summarizes it all. All I have to say, I'm a quantum activist. And immediately people will know that I pursue happiness, just as our founding fathers said. Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That's what we are doing. Our founding fathers, like Thomas Jefferson, in essence, knew about quantum physics. In essence. I mean, of course, they didn't know the formulas and equations, but they knew that pursuit of happiness will come to the recognition of something that we don't have yet. And they prepared us for an advancement in future centuries, and that is now upon us. And now, really, this is the American dream, I think. Materialism has many effects. One of the effects is to bring technologies, and then because we don't have a healthy attitude towards these technologies, so we lose sight of the ill effects of the technology. Right now, the biggest problem is attention deficit in our young people. You all know that because you were in this business of radio, television. The wisdom is that they can't hold their attention more than a few seconds. So everything we have to teach, everything, the way we speak, everything has to be quick, because otherwise their attention will shift away. Does that bring in things like Nazism? Well, it can, because the thing is that you don't want to think. Anything that takes you a long time to think, kids try to avoid those things. And because of that, they are more susceptible to very authoritarian belief systems that make sense to them. And the other thing is, of course, is that they are now desensitized about violence. So violence is something they readily accept. In terms of the new science, this is because they want to feel embodied some of the time, because they are always in their head. So they feel very disembodied. So they bring themselves back to the body by watching violence, by watching sexuality and violence. So all these things influence the kids so much so that I think they may very well be susceptible to very authoritarian belief system. That would not surprise me. So you were right, however, that this is just a 2x4 with which you are being hit. As we are being hit, the worldview changes. As the worldview changes, we become responsible. As responsible people, we cannot possibly let our children become this way. We would limit the use of cell phones, we would limit the use of computer games, we'll limit the use of violence in TV, we'll limit the use of sexuality the way it is being used in entertainment. And in addition, we'll put positive things in schools, like we will allow meditation, we'll allow sitting down, we'll have more creativity in schools. Right now, it's very conditioned learning, very structured, authoritarian learning. Instead, we'll allow the kids to investigate, to be curious, investigate the nature of meaning. So I think that one thing will lead to the other. The first is, of course, a little catastrophic, a little chaotic, a little detrimental to our meaning processing. But eventually, when we go through this stage of suffering, I think the next stage is going to be quite brilliant, and we'll learn to utilize the energies of love. But I heard recently a story A huge accident took place in a bus, and there were school children in it, some 25 of them. And the reporters come, and the question they ask is that, is anybody dead? And the bus driver happily says that, no, nobody died. And the reporter went away. He's not interested. So, of course, these things are in a way that it has to change. This kind of theory that reminded me of the matter-antimatter kind of theories that were proposed before, and they don't usually work very well. They make some sense, and of course, there are much unexplained data, and the theories of cosmology is really quite speculative, hard to make a science of it because hard to find things that can be verified. That being the case, people will, of course, speculate. Dark matter is a huge speculation, so nobody can prevent people speculating that maybe electromagnetic forces are the more important item, not gravity. What goes against it is that the current theories based on gravity explains the phenomena at very deep levels. Like, for example, the Big Bang or the galaxy formation or how stars evolve. Here, the existing theory works very well. And that has the idea of gravity playing a major role in them. So at large scale, very large scale, does that remain the case, or the situation changes drastically? It's very hard to rule out any theory at this stage of the game. But if I had to vote for it, I would vote for the gravity-oriented theories more than electromagnetism. The God that we are discovering in quantum physics is not a personality. But of course, that is a common way of thinking about God. We are ascribing some anthropomorphism, thinking of God in the way that human beings are. But actually, what is the most striking thing about the God that we are discovering is that it is quite objective. And this is good because only an objective God, a non-human personalized God, can ever pass the muster of science. And science, otherwise, it would not be scientific. If God had personality and a personalized intelligence is doing all this, or a bunch of personalized intelligences are doing all this, then such a theory would not be a scientific theory. Yes, interpretations certainly, only those interpretations have to be trusted which are spontaneous. We call it creative moments. They're very spontaneous, instantaneous, coming into a picture, a new meaning, a new meaning of things that were very obscure before. And those are the interpretations that we trust. And you were completely right, very observant, that the present idea that I presented in this couple of hours, the idea of consciousness is the ground of all being, giving us a solution of quantum measurement paradox, is an interpretation which came in such a creative flash. So, these are called aha insights because it always comes with a surprise. A moment before, I did not know. I never would have thought that I would subscribe to an idea that now I totally believe in and find that experimental test exists for it. But before that moment of illumination, before that moment of aha insight, I just could never have guessed that this would be my next thought. So the spontaneous interpretations are the believable ones. The psyche occurs in a non-local way. It is related to us. So consciousness connects the psyche, universe of the psyche, and psyche consists of three parts. One is a mental world, one is a vital world, and another is a supramental world of archetypes like love, beauty, justice, truth, goodness. Those are the archetypes. Those are the kinds of things that inhabitate that world. So the objects of these worlds we can connect to only through the intermediary of consciousness. So these are all four possible worlds within consciousness. Consciousness mediates their interaction. So when it is understood this way, then we realize that they are all non-locally connected without signals, connected with this interconnectedness. So imagine an wireless internet that pervades through all the four multiverse that we are really made of. And we have a body, personalized body in each of these worlds, except the supramental. We haven't done that part yet. That is our future. But we have a personalized body in the physical. The mental and the vital body that we have are somewhat different in character. They are functional bodies of habit patterns rather than the physical structured body. Those are details. But this is the important thing, that it's a non-local connection. So all of this requires enormous amount of work, and so what we are doing is creating a movement of people who will be dedicated toward their own transformation, and also at the same time will work towards transforming the world, transforming the social systems. In other words, they themselves will work to change democracy if they're in politics, if they'll work to change economy and businesses if they are business people. They will work to change education if that's where they work. And so people will pursue a meaningful life, bringing change to themselves and change to the world. You know, take our president seriously. Yes, we can, and yes, we can change that we can believe in. But that change, in my opinion, can only come if we change our worldview. It is a shame that people talk about change, but they never talk about what we really have to change first. We have the lens with which we look at the world, our view. Gravity has effect on how fast or slow a time clock moves, but it is very difficult to find the intense gravity wells so that we can prove these things in an observational sense. And since science is based on both theory and experiment, my view on this is that we should keep away from these speculative, highly speculative theories that is now being produced by physicists because they ran out of useful theories. So now physics has become a plethora of very abstract, very impossible to verify pseudoscientific theories. This is very sad, and this is why graduate students no longer are running to physics for satisfying their curiosity. They would rather become businessmen and make money than worry about problems which are meaningless. Of course, I would like to invite everyone to problems of consciousness and primacy of consciousness science, but there is no money in it yet. So first of all, we have to convince the society, the government, to give us research grants to examine this field so that more quick changes can take place. More research money is needed drastically. So my urge to you is that don't waste your time on this sheer speculations of a dying materialist science. Turn to useful problems of ourselves, our consciousness, what we can do, how we can change. For example, how we can get ourselves out of these problems that we are repeating many times, economic meltdown, healthcare. These are the issues that we should invest intellectually. Solve the healthcare problem. Here, the answer is actually surprisingly amazing, because what this new science does, it legitimizes alternative medicine. This alternative medicine practices, acupuncture is a prime example, mind-body medicine is another one, Indian medicine of Ayurveda is still another one, homeopathy is another one. These alternative medicine practices, anybody who has ever undertaken them, and acupuncture probably is something that almost every American has had some experience with, are very effective, especially for chronic diseases. What quantum physics has done, it has allowed us to solve the fundamental objections that scientists always have raised against such alternative medicine theories. In other words, quantum physics allows us to develop a proper theory, proper verifiable theory of vital energy movements and mental meaning movements that these medicinal systems are based on. Therefore, with this knowledge, we really can, in a secure way, we can have an alternative to allopathy for those diseases for which allopathy does not have any answer, such as our chronic disease. So in this field of chronic disease, if we use the lead of quantum physics and bring this alternative medicine to bear, then our healthcare system would be solved simply because this alternative medicine is very cheap. The other thing that the new science does, quantum physics teaches solidly not only a sense of responsibility, but it also teaches us how to be creative. So therefore, people can take responsibility for their own health care, and people also, if they get sick, they can learn to involve themselves into a creative process for quantum healing. Unexpected, we talked about it very briefly with others, where people get healed by others meditate on their healing. Similarly, a person can meditate on one's own healing and visualize healing possibilities. And in the process, creatively, what we call a quantum leap takes a discontinuous transition from disease to healing. This is available to every person if he or she would follow the step-by-step processes of creativity. Quantum healing and vital body healing, these new medicinal systems, taking responsibility for ourselves, preventive medicine, all of this becomes open in the new way of approaching health and healing through quantum physics and primacy of consciousness thinking. This is where the future of medicine is. And this would be fantastic because our costs would drastically go down. Basic things that we think, but don't forget that the earth is revolving around the sun. So the gravity is there, but because the earth is also revolving around the sun, it falls a little bit. But because it's revolving, so it always falls a little bit. But because it's curving, it's always kept on curving. So we can put it this way, that the earth is always falling a little bit towards the sun, but never enough, always just enough to keep in orbit, keep in the elliptical orbit that follows. In other words, if you neglect the movement in elliptical orbit, of course the earth would fall into the sun. But because the earth moves also around the sun, it avoids falling into the sun totally. It just falls always just a little bit to keep into orbit, keep in the orbit. You don't age, but if you did come back to Earth, then you would find that everybody else has aged enormously. So it is a one-way time travel in that sense, that you travel to a future without aging because you jumped into a very fast-moving spaceship, if such spaceships could be built. But of course, this is where we really don't have any real physics because we know we cannot build spaceships of that kind, but it's a very popular idea with science fiction. Now, it's impossible to actually enact it because we cannot build such very fast-moving spaceships. Only if a spaceship could be built which moves with the speed of near the speed of light, then only we age so little that we can come and meet our grandfather, and all these questions would come about causality. How could I be produced if my grandfather wasn't there, and stuff like that. In part of my mind, I never investigated it thoroughly enough to say things without feeling that I'm speaking tongue-in-cheek. But if you have that caveat in mind, then I can say this, that some of the data that, there are two kinds of UFO data. One is these bad guys that are coming after us. They really want to kill us off and occupy Earth, so to speak. Those theories are not very attractive. But there is also these UFO sightings where people meet very benevolent, very wonderfully developed, very spiritual people coming from outer space. That makes some sense because, that is our future. When we become very spiritual, when we become very adept to the subtleties of consciousness, then a day might come when physical laws can be violated in a local way, not in a big way. Because if we try to do it big way, then the universe cannot exist. But if we do it in a local way, there is really no harm done. So in other words, these people may have the capacity of disappearing and reappearing. In other words, materialization in some very future sense that we cannot even fathom. I mean, I cannot imagine the science of this. This is where tongue-in-cheek comes in. But suppose these people do it as a violation, clean violation of a physical law, just a local violation, and then these UFOs start making sense. And these people really, there is some indication that they are such loving people that maybe they have understood the laws of physics so thoroughly. They have purified themselves in consciousness so thoroughly that they are beyond the laws of physics themselves. So it's not completely, I cannot completely rule it out, let me put it that way. If you have read the Course in Miracles, there is a reference in Course in Miracles about science of eternity. You know, we deal with science of space-time. It's a space-time bound science. But couldn't there be a science also when we have the capacity of taking ourselves in that transcendent domain where our where downward causation comes from? If we are capacitated to have our being so much in tune with downward causation, with God, so to speak, then we may be able to perform local miracles, and then it would make complete sense to have visitations by this UFO and these kind of people, because they are not bound by the restrictions of space travel as we are. Now, these states of self-realization, they really are achievable. One has to follow creative process, and if we follow that, anyone has the potential to see for himself or herself these states of consciousness that traditions call superconscious. Our ordinary ego consciousness is a separate consciousness, but in this superconscious states, we become one with the universe. My worry is about the run-of-the-mill kid who is not being properly chaperoned into these new technologies by their parents or by their teachers, and therefore getting into attention deficit disorder and stuff like that, or having definitely small problems with attention span and therefore problems with learning. So I'm more concerned about the average situation. The geniuses will always be there, and the talents will always be there. There is no question that there are as many kids with curiosity today or more with curiosity today than ever was.